My name is Gail Kerwin. I've been a Baha'i for 59 years, and I've been through a lot of plans and activities, and in all of those plans, the youth played a great part, and so I always enjoy being with youth, and it's been a real source of happiness for me to be here at Nebi Fest here in 2008. Now, I became a Baha'i in 1949, and the sequence of that was our cousin came by who had just become a Baha'i and asked us to go to a fireside in Detroit. And we started going in January, and we went to the fireside for 3 months, and at the end of that time we became Baha'is. Now, our first meeting, there were people there of many cultures, and I had never had an opportunity to be with so many people like that, but I had the strangest feeling that I had come home. And so it was no trouble at all for my husband and I to drive the hour and a half back and forth to Detroit to learn more about the Baha'i faith. And in the course of learning, we had a fair idea of what the Baha'i faith was, but there was a lot that we really didn't know. But what had happened, that something had taken place in our heart, and we knew that Baha'u'llah was who he said that he was, and there was nothing left to do but to begin to try to carry out in our lives what it was that he wanted us to do. Now, when Shoghi Effendi sent the messages about a 10-year world crusade, when we first heard of it, we thought, well, maybe we can go somewhere else in the United States. But then as we began to see the enthusiasm of the people that were going, and we saw the map of Shoghi Effendi with the red dots, it was something about that, there came a realization in our hearts that it was something that Shoghi Effendi wanted us to do, and so we decided that we would go out of the country, and by a sequence of events, we ended up in Nassau, Bahamas, and we were able to be there 2 years and form the first local spiritual assembly. And then as our money ran out, was running out, Shoghi Effendi said that we should return to the United States and move into the South. And it was going as a pioneer was something that changed our whole lives, and we didn't know in the beginning when we went that we had taken a step that was going to unfold, and we would have experiences that we hadn't anticipated. And when I come to Nebi Fest, and this is my second year, maybe third, I'm always happy to be here because I realize that at my age, my service is coming to an end, but theirs is just beginning. And to have the opportunity, like I had, to share with them how happy it made me feel to be in the presence of the generation that was carrying the faith into the future. Now, I know Shoghi Effendi had called upon the youth to be heroes, saints, and martyrs, and that sounds scary, but it's really, really quite simple. To be a hero, you do a courageous act. And the writings say that the arising to teach the faith causes one to have courage and power, and that's one of the promises in the faith, is that we don't do these things alone, that if we arise to serve, we're endowed with the capacity to serve. If we arise to serve, we're qualified to serve, and that there's divine assistance, and we become a part of building the kingdom of God on earth. Now, the kingdom of God doesn't just come out overnight. It's a long process. And Abdu'l-Baha has explained to us that we're heavenly farmers that are becoming seed sowers. And so as a seed sower, we have a vision of what it is we're trying to accomplish. And we know that if we don't plant the seed, the tree and the blossom and the fruit will never come into being. And so when we become Baha'is, we're either planting seeds, nurturing seeds, or seeing the fruit of it. And youth has the energy and the enthusiasm to carry the faith into the future from this day forward. And each one holds in their hand a handful of seeds, and if they don't plant those seeds, they'll never come into being. It will always just remain a vision or a dream. And so last year's theme was the path of service, and I'd like to share with youth that if they take one step, the path unfolds. They have no idea where it might take them, but it's what God has willed for them. And so it becomes a matter of being willing to take just that one step. And sometimes it seems scary to think about doing things that we've never done before and hoping that everything's going to turn out okay. But this year we've had the theme, the stage is set. And now all that we need is the players that will arrive and play their part. And Shoghi Effendi has promised all of us that the Supreme Concourse is suspended between heaven and earth, looking for instruments through which it can work and win the victory. And we need only to arise saying, "Here am I, use me as you will." And I have every confidence as I looked into the faces of the youth that were at the gathering tonight, that they are the ones that will become the heroes, saints, and martyrs, because their faces are so filled with joy and hope and optimism. And they've been so kind to me that I hope that when I try to say that if I were to give advice, it would be this: to take every opportunity to serve the faith. And we'll find that we will have experiences we never knew we would have, and we will develop qualities we never knew that we had.
Aloha, friends. How y'all doing? Good. So, of course, as per the program, we have two wonderful people here. One is Mea Gazadeh, who's going to share with us some of the historical context and some of the things that probably you may or you may not know about the Knights of Baha'u'llah. And we really wanted to create that framework really to have Gail Kerwin, who is a Knight of Baha'u'llah, to share with us her experiences in history. And but before we get started with May, I do want to just ask a couple of questions so that we create the right mood and context. First is, we can either do it one way or the other. How many people know what a Knight of Baha'u'llah is, or what a Knight of Baha'u'llah is? Okay, cool. All right. So,
who doesn't know?
Oh, there were some people who didn't. Yeah, I didn't want the people who didn't know to have to put up their hands. So I just wanted the people who know that, you know. And so May will share with us from a Baha'i perspective, but I do want to share one thing before, which is, you know, in every time and in every age and in your day, which is today, you have your heroes. And some of those heroes could be real people, such as whether they're sports heroes or people in politics or all these sort of things, or they may be heroes that we see about in fiction. So, you know, we can think of Harry Potter, right? Can we think of some heroes? I mean, who would be some of heroes, either real or fictional, that you look up today?
I always liked Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird.
Good, great. Any other ideas of heroes that we can think of that are either real or in the movies or books that you can think of? I mean, who are your heroes today? Superman? Martin Luther King? Uh-huh. Pardon me? Your mom? Pardon me? Frodo, exactly. Any other heroes that we can think of, real or in fiction? Pardon me? George Bush, okay, for those. Pardon me? Mother Teresa? Right. So also, wouldn't you think of, you know, again, it's part fictional, but the King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, right? They had a mission in that, right? So we think of all these heroes. And then, of course, when we think of the Baha'i faith, there are many heroes that we can think of. What are some of the heroes that you can think of in the Baha'i faith? Can you name some? Pardon? Mullah Hussein? Mona? Tahiri? Louis Gregory? Pardon me? Right. So now here's another question then. Can you think of any heroes of the Baha'i faith or people that you've known that have really sacrificed that you've actually met? So for instance, how many people have met a hand of the cause? Wonderful. So you've either maybe you've been on pilgrimage and met Mr. Furatan and that, so a hand of the cause would clearly be. And how many have actually met a Knight of Baha'u'llah already? Has anyone met a Knight of Baha'u'llah? A few. Okay. So the reason I say that is really, Gail Kerwin lives in Stamford, and she's on the local assembly, and our family and myself, we live in Stamford, and we're really, really privileged, and we're very happy to have Gail in our community. And what's special about Gail is that she keeps us on our toes. So I can't tell you how many times in an assembly meeting where all of us experienced adults who've been on assemblies and that, and we'll either say, what about this and what about that? And Gail, she's on top of it. She reads all the writings, she reads the letters and guidance from the NSA, and she really has that experience, really as a servant of Baha'u'llah, and also who has that spiritual insight, that we have that bounty in our assembly, in our community, to have Gail here. And so, sorry, we really wanted to share Gail with you. And that's really why we really have this privilege and this bounty that there aren't many Knights of Baha'u'llahs around. And so we're very excited and happy that you're here. And we'll let May share with us some of the Baha'i historical context and you know, about 10 or 15 minutes or so. And then Gail will share some of her experience. And then we want to make sure there's enough time for questions and that. Okay? There we go.
Okay.
So May?
Okay, hi everybody. There's a chair for you up front here. Somebody wants to sit down. No? Okay, no takers? Okay. Well, I had a great privilege of being asked by Johann to provide somewhat of a historical sort of an introduction to the Knights of Baha'u'llah, because then it became an opportunity for me to learn. So I created a little sort of an outline on this piece of paper just to help you maybe follow. And if you want to just pass, I hope that there's enough for everybody. If you want to just take one and pass it down. And then when I sat down, I had always heard about the Knights of Baha'u'llah. I knew vaguely that the Knights of Baha'u'llah took off during the 10-year crusade. But I really didn't have a real full understanding of the history behind it. And so I did a lot of my research with these books, and I wanted to bring them because what I'm going to share with you is by no means comprehensive, and it hopefully might inspire some of you to do further research on your own. So I think that the major source, for me anyway, I found a lot in this book. It's a biography of the Hand of the Cause of God, Leroy Iowas. And he was actually like a right-hand man to Shohei Effendi, literally, in the Holy Land. He was the hand of the cause who was living and serving in Haifa, and who took care of a lot of the nuts and bolts of construction, over the embellishment of the shrine of the Bab on Mount Carmel and so forth. And so I found a lot of my source material in here. The Priceless Pearl, which is the biography of Shohei Effendi. He was the guardian of the Baha'i faith. And I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but is there anyone who's not really clear? Now, somebody here who's maybe newer to the Baha'i faith, or you're just not clear about Shohei Effendi? So I don't want to just throw his name around if you're not sure who he is. So he was a guardian of the hand of the cause, and he was the successor, the appointed successor to Abdul-Baha. When Abdul-Baha passed away in 1921, in his will and testament, he appointed his grandson, eldest grandson, Shohei Effendi, become the guardian of the Baha'i faith. And then this Baha'i World, 1954 to 1963, was extremely helpful. And this basic Baha'i chronology was very helpful. And then I wrote just a little resource book here called The Quickeners of Mankind for some inspirational quotations. So anyway, Shohei Effendi was really our master planner in the Baha'i faith. And what is he best known for? Are there any ideas out there about what Shohei Effendi, he had, incredible contributions. But what do we have today in place that Shohei Effendi started? Yes?
I guess you would have the hands of the cause of God to use lots of justice.
That's right. He appointed the hands of the cause of God. There were hands of cause of God actually also appointed by Abdul-Baha, and I think by Baha'u'llah maybe, posthumously. But yes, he did appoint like the bulk of the hands of the cause of God that we know of to the present day, and he did also establish that predecessor, you can kind of call it, to the House of Justice, which the name is escaping me, but
the Baha'i International Council.
International Council.
Baha'i International Council.
Yes. What did Shohei Effendi do during the guardianship, which helped to consolidate and move the faith forward? What did he do? What was he best known for? Can anyone think of that? When the master passed away in 1921, I found out that we have 31 national assemblies established in the world. After Shohei Effendi started, he would start to give these national assemblies plans. He would give them plans, and in these plans there would be goals. Goals for consolidating the Baha'i faith and also for teaching it. And through this mechanism, from 1921 to 1952, we had a growth in the faith being established in 31 countries, jumping to 128 countries, which is a pretty big jump. In 1952, the Guardian said, this is a holy year. It was the commemoration of 100 years anniversary of Baha'u'llah receiving the intimation of his station in the Siyah Chalk. He received that in 1852. So in 1952, the Guardian said, let's take a pause. Let's celebrate this, and let's reflect. And he planned for 4 intercontinental conferences throughout the world, and he would send his representatives, the hands of the cause of God, to these different conferences. And during this time, the Guardian started to introduce this grand plan, this great 10-year plan, which became the Crusade, the 10-year Crusade. And the 10-year Crusade then officially began in 1953. And the first thing he did was that he drew up a map. And he started to share this map. Now, of course, this is a reproduction of Shohei Effendi's map, which maybe later on you want to come up and look at. It's very interesting. Now, here he has filled in the names and dates of all the different pioneers, or the Knights of Baha'u'llah, who left during this 10-year crusade. So the 10-year crusade basically, stay with my. So 1953 was the inauguration of this 10-year crusade, but during the year 1952, it was unfolded, let's say, to the world. The hands of the cause would go to these conferences. Imagine a conference like this, but even on a grander scale, an intercontinental conference. And they would introduce the 10-year plan, or the crusade. And they would call for an unprecedented number of believers to arise, to leave their homeland, and to pioneer into the world, to open up virgin territories. These were territories that were had not yet been populated by any Baha'is. And the goal was 131, I believe. Lost it here. Yes. 131 virgin territories. And Shohei Effendi said, we must build lighthouses of the faith through which the Holy Spirit may descend. So this was his message to the Baha'is of the world at that time. He was saying, consider arising and becoming a Knight of Baha'u'llah. One of the beautiful things is that Shohei Effendi always derived his inspiration for his plans, for all of these ideas and these plans. He derived inspiration from the writings and from the prophets of old. And I thought that was very beautiful. The inspiration for this crusade, as Abdu'l-Baha explains, it was derived from a prophecy of Daniel, as explained by Abdu'l-Baha. Blessed is he who cometh unto the 1,335 days. And Abdu'l-Baha explains that this would be the declaration 1963, which would be the declaration, the centenary of the declaration of Baha'u'llah. And at that time, the teachings of God will be firmly established upon the earth, and the divine light would flood the world from the east even unto the west. So this was prophesied by Abdu'l-Baha. This was the quotation from Daniel, but he interpreted and prophesied that in 1963 that the faith of Baha'u'llah would be firmly established throughout the world. So Shohei Effendi's inspiration then was to take this period of 10 years, 1953 to 1963, and call for this, for this grand sort of expansion of the faith, and have every single territory settled by at least one Baha'i believer and opened to the faith. So it was like a tremendous and amazing sort of call to sort of spread the cause of God. So one of Shohei Effendi's pleas to the believers was that the most glorious service any Baha'i can render, regardless of what position he is in or what his station is to go into one of these virgin areas of the crusade. So that was sort of the big push. And like I said, as the believers during the 10-year crusade started to arise, started to leave and settle themselves, he would start to fill in their names on this map and kept a very, very, precise details of what was happening. And then as an extra, sort of a reward for their sacrificial, selfless services during this time. Oh, here it is. He also did something very beautiful in his own hand. He prepared a beautiful scroll, and on the scroll, he calls it the Roll of Honor, Baha'i World Crusade, 1953 to 1963. And he fills in their names and the date and the locality that they pioneered to. And this scroll was actually placed under the threshold door to the shrine of Baha'u'llah in Bakji by Amatul Baharuhiya Khanu in 1992. So that was very special. I want to leave this also available for you to come and look at it later. So I'll just go like this.
So as we reflect on the heroes in the Baha'i faith that we have read about and we've met in terms of the hands of the cause, as we reflect of the heroes that either fiction or real today that we know of or met, And now that you've heard a Baha'i context, of the historical context that May has just explained, really we have this wonderful privilege to hear really from Gail, who's going to share with us really both her personal stories during the time when she and her husband were a Knight of Baha'u'llah to the Bahamas, and also during that time of the 10-year crusade when she was also in South Carolina at the time of the mass teaching. So maybe we can warmly welcome Gail and really thank her for wanting to spend time with us.
As I mentioned to a few, I'm an elderly lady. I'll be 87 in a month or so. And I've been a Baha'i a long time. And I've had a lot of experiences. But what I want to share is I think that Johann each year kind of arranges for me to speak to a group of youth. And it's not so much that you can be with me, but it's so I can be with you. Because my service to the faith is steadily coming to an end, and yours is just beginning. Now, my husband and I were about we had been Baha'is about 4 years when there began to be the conversation that there was going to be a 10-year world crusade. And we were at the summer school, and we saw all the enthusiasm among the people who had already decided that they were going to go to a virgin territory. And so we sort of thought, well, maybe we could pioneer on the home front. But after we got home, and this was in the fall, we decided to volunteer out of the country. And people often ask, why did you decide to go? Was it because you knew you were going to be a Knight of Baha'u'llah and all these things? I don't think we were really aware of anything about Knights of Baha'u'llah, but we saw the map with all the dots on it, and we later thought when Shoghi Effendi made the map and put all those dots on, there was a power released that began to touch the hearts of people. And our heart was touched enough to decide that we would go somewhere. Well, we had an 8-year-old daughter, and we were firstly assigned to French Guiana. And that was where Devil's Island, that was off the coast. And when the Western Teaching Committee looked into it, they decided it was no place to send anybody with a child. And so we finally ended up being assigned to the Bahamas. Now, by the time we reached, came to the time when we knew where we were going, we had received word from Shoghi Effendi that he wanted the Knights, as many as possible, to be at their post by the anniversary of the birth of the Bab, which was October 20th. That gave us 2 weeks to get ourselves ready to go. And we were just into the 2 weeks, and my husband strained his back and was in bed. Now, our family already thought we were crazy. And when this happened, they hovered over us and said, oh, it's a sign, you shouldn't go. And we thought it could have been a sign, and we would have decided not to go. But it didn't enter our heads. It was like we were tunnel vision. We were going to be in that spot by the 20th of October. And so in 2 weeks, him in bed, me getting rid of everything. I would have burned the whole thing in order to meet that deadline. And our family didn't help us at all, but a friend who was not a Baha'i found a doctor that would come in and give my husband a shot. And so on October 16th, we were on the bus with our daughter, leaving Detroit for Miami. And we arrived in the Bahamas on the afternoon of the 19th of October. Now, we were only there for 2 years, but were able to form in a year and a half the first local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Nassau, Bahamas. Now, I decided that I would like to share with you that the promises in the faith are all true, and I've lived long enough to know that that's so. And those promises are that people can change, that if we arise to serve, we will be endowed with the capacity to serve. If we arise to serve, we're qualified to serve, and that every service bears fruit. Shoghi Effendi said, if not now, in the future. And I'm going to share some stories that kind of will explain that that is in reality true. Now, the second believer in the Bahamas was a young man who drank a lot, and he saw us meeting in the homes of some of the people, and he would stand outside that home and watch what was going on. And all through the week, he would pray that God would help him to not be drunk so he could come to that meeting. And the Sunday came when he was able to be there, and he stood up under the single bulb that came down out of the ceiling, and he began to read from the writings, and he read about love and unity. And he said, my grandmother told me a long time ago that if people come here teaching love and unity, you should listen to them. And he became a Baha'i right away. And he stopped drinking immediately. And when the National Spiritual Assembly of Nassau, Bahamas was formed 15 years later, he was still there as a Baha'i. Now, it wasn't easy going into another culture and country. We were told to not teach the European, not teach, Shoghi Effendi advised, not teach the tourists coming in, but to teach the native Bahamian. And this is what we immediately began to do. My daughter and I would just walk into the Grantstown, as it was called, and first time in we met a woman that had a little building, and she put up hems in dresses and things. And she became the person that carried us around, as she called it, and to meet all the people. And she would say, these are my friends, and thus and so. And when a lot of them heard that we were speaking of love and unity, they became Baha'is because their grandmothers had told them that this was the case. Now, in 1955, Shoghi Effendi wrote a letter saying that he hoped that local spiritual assemblies would be formed in the Virgin Territories that year. So we gathered together all the people that had been coming to meetings and asked them if they would meet every night for a week to find out what they needed to know to become Baha'is. And by the afternoon of the 19th, enough of them had become Baha'is that we were able to form the first local spiritual assembly. Now, toward the end of 1955, the monies that we had were beginning to be depleted. And so the Western Hemisphere Teaching Committee got in touch with Shoghi Effendi, and he said, permission granted, Kerwins leave Bahamas, but settle in the South. And so we left and we settled in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now I'm wanting to share with all of you that the 10-year World Crusade wasn't a matter of just Knights of Baha'u'llah going to Virgin Territories. Every country where there was a National Assembly, and there were 12 in the beginning, had their own home front goals. And Shoghi Effendi would address letters here in America to home front crusaders, as he called them. And he said in many messages that the home front crusaders, on whom in the last resort depends the fate of the entire community. And there were people all over that in the United States that left their homes and went to states where they needed to have spiritual assemblies formed. So in my thinking, we never, my husband and I never thought of ourselves as heroes, because and we ended up coming back from the Bahamas with our whole life changed. When we went there, we were a family, ordinary people with ordinary lifestyle and whatever, and we had our friends and we had our social activities and all these things, and the Baha'i faith was a part of that. When we came back from the Bahamas, the Baha'i faith was our life. And it was as though somebody had inoculated us with the idea that we were pioneers. So we spent most of our life moving. In fact, we lived in 4 different states. Wherever there was need of a goal to have an assembly formed, we would decide to go. And in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a year and a half, there was a local spiritual assembly. So we're there from 55 to 60. And at that time, we were asked to be administrators at the Llewellyn Baha'i School. And I'll get back to that in a minute. In 1960, I was asked by the National Teaching Committee to be a travel teacher for the faith. So the last 3 years of the crusade, I travel taught. And it was in many states. And it was there that I began to find what I considered the real heroes of the faith, the unsung heroes of the faith. And I want to share just three stories about that. There was a Persian lady who had moved to a place to open or to share the faith enough to have a local spiritual assembly. And she was an elderly lady, and if she went out of her house, she lived on a second floor, a lot of steps. If she went out of her house more than once a day, she had to crawl back up the steps to get to her apartment. And then there was another elderly lady who had moved to another place, and her apartment was so cold at night because it was one of those little pot-belly stoves where you, in the night everything would go out. She'd have to get up in the cold in the morning and build the fire. And there were so many rats in her house that when she put out her decon, they even carried away the pan that she had put the decon in. And her children hovered around her and said, "Mother, if you don't move from here, you're going to die." And she said, "If I move, I'll die." And then there was a young girl who lived in an apartment where she had to stuff paper in the cracks to keep warm, and she only ate oatmeal and fruit because that's all the money that she had to take care of. And in all those places where those heroes had lived, there now are flourishing assemblies. And it's because, how am I doing with my time? And I get off track. Okay. It was a time in the United States during the 10-year World Crusade where there was so much activity going on that we weren't aware of, and people were involved. And one was the Western Hemisphere Teaching Committee. They spent time writing letters, directing pioneers where to go, letters to encourage them, all these kind of things. There were people doing all kinds of things to win goals and whatever. And I think that it's what I want to say is everybody can become a hero in the faith. In fact, Shoghi Effendi at one time said, "It's to the rank and file of the believers that we must turn. From them will come the heroes, saints, and martyrs." And then to the youth, he said the same thing. Now, it sounds kind of scary to become a hero, saint, or martyr. But a hero is someone that does a courageous act. And the writings say that when we promote the teachings, it's the source of courage and power. And when someone asked Shoghi Effendi, asked Abdu'l-Baha, what makes a saint a saint? And I've got a little paper here that explains that. Abdu'l-Baha said, because they were cheerful when it was difficult to be cheerful, patient when it was difficult to be patient, and because they pushed on when they wanted to stand still, and kept silent when they wanted to talk, and were agreeable when they wanted to be disagreeable. That was all. It was quite simple and always will be. Now, we were in Charlotte, North Carolina when Shoghi Effendi died. And he was in London, and he had been working on another map like this to show the success of the mid-year point of the 10-year World Crusade, and he died of the flu. And when the message came to all of us, it was though for a moment our hearts stood still. But then we begin to remember that he had always been our commander-in-chief. He had sent us, given us goals. He had monitored the goals. He had kept us on track. He had sent us letters, always signing them, "Your true brother." And then it came to us that he would always live in our hearts because he had left letters, and we knew what we had to do to end that crusade. And so it gave us a determination throughout the whole world, and in America in particular, to accomplish all these goals. Now, it's the goals of the crusade were many, as has already been mentioned. And in 259 people volunteered to open a virgin territory. And half of those, almost half of those, were women. So it was the first time in the history of a world religion that men and women equally propagated a faith. Now, if you want to know all the things that were accomplished in the crusade, there's the book, The Century of Light. If you want to read some of Shoghi Effendi's letters to the home front crusaders, those are in Citadel of Faith. Now, how much time am I having here? Whatever.
We're going to save time for questions and answers.
Yeah.
So just go one after.
We have, how much time we have here? Not,
It's till 6 o'clock.
oh, okay. All righty. Now let's see. You know, when you get to be my age, you can remember things in the past. You walk into a room and you wonder, why am I here? So I thought to myself, geez, I'm going to have to put down some notes here. And I forgot to look at my notes, and I'm probably off track and everything. But let me, and here again, you know, I've got a hearing aid, and my eyesight isn't all that good, so I have to look like this. So now, give me a minute to look back here and see what it was I thought I should be doing. Oh. Okay. Alrighty. Going back to when we were getting ready to go to the Bahamas. After we arrived, my mother wrote a letter. And in this letter, she told me how foolish I was to have left the country and dragged my daughter to a place that nobody knew anything about. And she said in the letter, what the world really needs is people like the disciples of Christ who will go out and bring people back to God. And I wrote my mother a long letter, and I explained this is exactly what we think we're doing. Well, in 1963, my mother became a Baha'i. and I'm sharing this story to see how things happen in the faith. She had been reading some of the writings, and she reached a point where she felt that Baha'u'llah was a holy man, but not like Jesus. And at Christmas time, she and my father were delivering gifts, and she was thrown out of the car and severely injured. And when she came to, she knew she was severely injured, but she said, what went through my mind was Baha'u'llah must have been with me. And she said when that went through her mind, she saw everything with new eyes. And the night that she enrolled, she took out of her pocketbook that letter that I had written her and said, now I understand. So there's all these things that happen in the faith. Now let me see what I've got on. You can tell that I'm really old, can't you? I say to Johan and some of the friends, you know, I think sometimes I shouldn't be doing these things anymore. Okay.
I forget a lot of stuff and I ramble when I'm 19. I don't have excuses.
You know, Gail, maybe, because I know in the past when we've talked, I know that Gail really sometimes feels that she wants to share a message and she feels that she's preparing for her next journey. And maybe there's something in your heart, I know you have your notes in that you'd like to share with the friends in terms of...
How much time do I have to share that?
More than enough time.
Okay. Oh, true. I mentioned toward the end of the crusade, we were at the Llewellyn Baha'i School, and by that time, in the middle of the crusade, there began to be entry by troops by the black and brown people, mostly in Africa. And that sort of began to sway the hearts of people in America to try the same kind of things. So in Llewellyn in 1962, it was the first time that youth going to a summer school went out into nearby cities and began to teach the faith. They set up a public meeting. They went to newspapers and radios and had their meeting, and the 3 young people became Baha'is. The next year, they went into another city and did the same thing. And a year later, from Greenacre Baha'i School, teams left the school after the youth session and went to Cherokee Indian Reservation and to a rural community in Georgia. At the same time, in South Carolina, 2 chiropractic families begin to set up tent meetings, and a lot of people begin to become Baha'is from the African American community. And so in 1971, there was a conference, Gabriel, in which they asked pioneers to, or people to come and consider moving to South Carolina. Now, most of the people that came to that conference, or a lot of them, were youth. And they volunteered to go teaching, but they didn't think about moving there. So in 1972, we had the beginning of what was called the Army of Light. 20 young people left the session, went through a lot of study of the Baha'i writings, and began in January a journey through the cities in South Carolina until when they were finished, thousands of people became Baha'is there. All told, probably 6,000 Baha'is. Now, my husband and I retired there in '72 as well, and for a little while I marched with them. And they helped me up the inclines and whatever, and no one ever said anything to me except one youth one time said, "My, you're slow." So our house became a halfway house for youth. They came from all over, and they would stay there long enough to go through enough material to be united, and then they would go out in the field. I would go with them until they got an idea of what to do, knocking on doors and all of those things, and then they would be assigned to different places. And my husband and I followed up a lot of the places where they had gone, and many times the people would say to us, "We saw those youth coming up our driveway or coming onto our porch," and they said they were surrounded by a light, and we thought to ourselves, they must be angels. And there's a place in the Bible where it tells us, "Don't turn anyone away from your door, lest it be an angel unaware." And so the people figured that these were angels and listened to what they said and became really good Baha'is. But we had all this expansion and no way of consolidation. And so just toward the end of the time that we were there, we began to get little bits of Rui material on little sheets of paper, and then we would draw pictures and color them in and whatever. And so when we visited when we were on pilgrimage in 1977, Ruhia Hanum rolled out, invited us to tea, and she rolled all of this out, and she said, we know how to expand, but we don't know how to consolidate. And so now all of us, some of us are becoming Rui tutors, because we know that we now have the key to how to take care of expansion.
Gail's being modest because she has completed Book 7.
Yes.
So.
Does anybody want to be a tutor? But no, I have to think a minute. I'm just giving you bits and snatches of how the faith changes people, how if you rise to serve, you are endowed with the capacity to serve. Most of us Knights of Baha'u'llah were ordinary people, and we never thought of ourselves as anything but just Baha'is that saw that there was a need and loved Shoghi Effendi enough that we made the decision or the choice to do something about that need. Now, a lot of disjointed things, but here's a picture now in 1992 at the anniversary of the passing of Baha'u'llah. The Knights of Baha'u'llah were invited to come to Haifa by the Universal House of Justice, and they invited representatives from all of the National Spiritual Assemblies, and that was 56, because we had 12 at the beginning of the crusade, 56 at the end. And that was when the Knights of Baha'u'llah and the people from the country could meet in fond embrace, because so many years ago their countries had been opened and they were the fruit and the flower of all that had taken place. Now here again, Knights of Baha'u'llah went and opened all these places, but other people came and nurtured and carried on and brought many of the goals to fruition. Now, and this is kind of what I want to say. You know, a long time ago, Jesus said in the Bible, and I'm really going back, aren't I? That when they asked him how, he said, "Be prepared for the coming of the kingdom," and they asked him, "Well, how will it be?" And he likened it to a mustard seed, and he said it will grow and grow into a huge tree, and all the fowls of the air will come and be nested. So we learned from that the coming of the kingdom is a unfolding process. So that whenever any of us have become Baha'is, we become a part of the building of the kingdom. And Abdu'l-Baha has told us here in the northeastern states, but it's true for wherever you live. He said, "Now you must become heavenly farmers and scatter pure seeds in the prepared soil." Now, to be a seed planter, you have a vision, the dream or vision of the tree and the blossom and the fruit. And you often know that when you plant that seed that you may not see the end in the beginning. There will be others that will nurture the seed. And then there will be those that don't plant the seed, they haven't nurtured the seed, but they wake up one morning and see the fruit and they say, "Ooh, it just happened overnight." But in that fruit are other seeds, and those seeds need to be planted. And so those of us that are living now are seed planters, or we're nurturing, or we're seeing the fruit of someone else's efforts. Now, as every one of you that's here, if I were to give you advice, it would be this: take every opportunity to serve the faith. Because if you do, you'll have experiences you never dreamed of having, and you will develop qualities that you never knew that you had. And each of us here today now is holding in our hand a number of seeds. And if we don't plant those seeds, they'll forever remain a dream. And what are the seeds that we're planting? From looking through the brochure, you've been going to a lot of classes here where they're talking about what this generation is called upon to do. So you're beginning to know what it is that needs to be done. Develop our cluster, help the junior youth to understand all of these things. And so now it just is up to each one of us to plant to plant our seed. Now, Shoghi Effendi, in sending messages, said that there are certain things that keep us from doing what needs to be done, and he said it was apathy, timidity, and complacency. And he said, don't allow these things to deter one. So a picture here of at that observation there was 131 Knights of Baha'u'llah. I think 151 were still living at the time, and if you'd like to see it, there, that picture there,
You think maybe we want to take some questions, Gail?
Yeah, I think it's time.
Okay. You have a question? And please speak it loudly because they're trying to record it. So.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I was wondering, when you are teaching so many new people to become Baha'is, how do you explain to them the various rules about being a Baha'i? Like, you have to say an obligatory prayer, or you can't drink. Like, was it ever difficult to instill all those rules besides just the unity and the love and the?
Well, I think Rain Wilson the other night sort of talked a little bit about that. When we were in the Bahamas, and another couple came there who was older, and when we would gather a group together, what we did is we studied with them out of Divine Art of Living, and their relationship with the creative word fills their heart with love for Baha'u'llah. And then as you love that person that you're with, you will know when the time is that you can begin to share what it is to be a Baha'i. Now, as I mentioned, in the Bahamas, there came that time with the people that had been studying with us when we had the message from Shoghi Effendi, the time to form a spiritual assembly. We gathered them all together and explained what it was to become a Baha'i, and enough of them became Baha'is to form that first spiritual assembly. Now there have been other people that it takes a long time to reach that period. Another example, I was in the travel teaching that I did. I went to over 40 states in the United States. And an example I think will help. There was a man came to the fireside, and he hadn't been drinking, but he did drink a lot. And in the course of the fireside, and you never know what's going to touch the heart of a person. He said, "It was though my hand reached up and touched the stars." And he went back home and made the decision that he was going to not drink anymore. And several years later, I ran into him, and he introduced me to his family. And he said, it was something happened. And I made that decision. And he said, now my family is Baha'i and their children are becoming Baha'is and whatever. Now I hope that sort of answers your question. Yeah. It's not practical in one sense, but it's a relationship of love. And so much is, there's a practical aspect to the faith, but there's a reality that can't be explained. And the reality of that is that we're in some way we're joined with every other person that we meet. Now, everybody right now is not programmed to be a Baha'i. I mean, that's an unfolding process as well. But the Universal House of Justice tells us that there are now people out there searching, and we are prepared for entry by truth. And so it's a matter of somehow forgetting one's whole self and thinking of the other person enough that you make whatever sacrifice is needed in order to help them make that step. Unfortunately, we don't have to do it alone anymore. We have all of each other here.
How do you teach to someone that you feel is receptive, but they tell you that they don't have enough time for spirituality, or they're not ready to become any sort of religion, to sign their card, or to be a part of any religion?
It may be a matter of time, because a lot of people now don't want to be a part of any organized religion. It's just what might be helpful if you can encourage them to come to something like this, maybe, where they begin to see the reality of the faith. And then something has to take place in their life, like it did with my mother. And so the one thing you can do is to continue to be a friend, but pray for them. Now that sounds simplistic, but you'll be surprised what can happen if you begin to pray for somebody. Now practically, I don't know, I'd have to know the person. But not everyone that we've talked to about the faith has become a Baha'i, and it may not be time. Like with my mother, it had to be 10 years. I don't think I've answered your question, but I don't know right now.
The period that the crusade took place in is just a very tumultuous period in world history and politics and things like this. Were you ever faced with any of these outside politics affecting what you were trying to do?
Yeah. When we first went to Charlotte, this is only just a personal thing. When I would write letters to the editor for when there'd be Negro History Week or some of these activities, and the minute the newspaper would hit somebody's doorstep, I receive a call, and they asked for Gail Kerwin, and I think they thought it was a man. And when I explained who I was, they said, "Oh my God, you're a woman." And they said, "We're going. If I ever meet you on the street, I'm going to kill you." And for sure, I'd run you out of town. And so I went to the police and said, should I be afraid? And they said, no, somebody calls you on the phone is usually not going to do anything. They just get a thrill out of saying what they want to say on the phone. Now all of a sudden I thought of something I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in 1955, in the World Crusade, the Iranian Baha'is faced a flurry of persecution. Cemeteries were desecrated, homes were pillaged, and lives were given. So here again, in the whole process of a world crusade, we look and we say, oh, they're Knights of Baha'u'llah, but there were so many heroes, saints, and martyrs connected with that period of time. It was a turning point in the whole American, or the whole world community, that's for sure. Just as that mass teaching in the South was a turning point for the whole world. And so I'm ready for another question. You see how I can get carried away?
More of a personal question, but how did you deal with and respond to the untimely passing of the guardian during this whole period?
I think I mentioned our first reaction was it's like time stood still. And then we begin to realize, you see, at the end of the 10-year World Crusade, the Universal House of Justice was elected. And so we realized that we were in good hands because it had been a process that had brought to that time. And we now had the whole administrative order laid, and that was the Universal House of Justice was the sole salvation of a stricken society. And it was that period of time between finding out that Shoghi Effendi had no heir and the election of the spiritual assembly was a difficult time. And how we, you're asking how we dealt with it. In the United States, how we did, that was partly why in 1960, several of us were asked to be travel teachers and go and visit communities with the goal in mind of deepening in the covenant, so we understood that even though there would never be any other guardians, it was all in keeping with the process as it should be. And so some people dealt with it in this way, and it may be difficult for all to understand, and I hope that you will, is some people did become covenant breakers and set up their own idea of what the faith was. But here again, the protection vouchsafed to us by Baha'u'llah took care of all of it. But it was not an easy time.
Did it require a lot of studying on your part, or among the people around you, studying the writings to understand the role of the Universal House of Justice, that it was the supreme body, the true supreme body of the Baha'i world? Did it require much study, or was it more of a natural type of, it was all,
I would say most with most of the believers there wasn't any problem, because remember Shoghi Effendi and May mentioned this in 1951 he began to appoint hands of the cause and Continental. What was that one that Leroy Iowis was on?
The International Council.
The International Council, and the Hands of the Cause appointed auxiliary board members, so that the transition was through all of that was easy.
Do you ever meet Shoghi or just letters?
No.
Okay.
No. No, I never did. But through his letters, it was though my husband and I had met him. I'm remembering that I mentioned that, or maybe I didn't, that all of the Knights of Baha'u'llah that went out were different in education, in time Baha'i, almost any time, anything you would mention, and they were able to stay at their posts for short periods of time, and others died at their posts, but we had a common thing that held us together, and that was our love for Baha'u'llah, for Shoghi Effendi. His letters always said, "Your true brother," and in 1977, when my husband and I went on pilgrimage, Rukia Khanum invited us to tea. Did I tell you that already? And she rolled out this scroll, and she said, when Shoghi Effendi died, I put a little note in with flowers. And she said, on the note it says, "From your loved ones." And she said the loved ones were all the people in the World Crusade that made Shoghi Effendi happy. So, and I hope I hope my husband and I made him happy.
I have a question / comment. I just think it's really interesting to compare the time in history that we're discussing right now to the time that we have right now with the new 5-year plan, and how we do have new consolidation, you know, and like you were saying earlier, a lot of believers came into the faith, but it was hard to consolidate those believers. And now we do have that, and it's almost like we have a new period of history emerging, and we're kind of starting that. And do you see any parallels between the time of the Crusade and the time that we have now, and what we can do with that?
This may answer your question. In the Crusade, we, up until 1957, we received letters from Shoghi Effendi telling us how to proceed in all of these things. Now we have the Universal House of Justice, and as we become acquainted with their messages, and try to plant the seeds of what they're saying, we'll be on target. You had last year walking a path of service. If we take one step of service, whether we understand fully what we're doing or not, the Spirit takes over, and it almost becomes an automatic thing, as long as we make the choice to do whatever comes to hand to do. And I think you've learned in some of your classes, especially the one about the generation with Rebecca Murray, what it is it's pretty clear what we should be doing. The clearest thing is everybody should arise to teach, and you'll be endowed with the capacity. And then there's another, we're at a point in time here now where the theme this year is the stage is set. And all we need now is the players to arise and play their part. And Shoghi Effendi promised a long time ago, he said, the Supreme Concourse is suspended between heaven and earth, looking for instruments through which it can work and win the victory. You need only turn to Baha'u'llah saying, "Here am I, use me as you will." So it isn't a matter of what education you have, where you are in life, whatever. if you arise to serve, you're qualified to serve. And it becomes now a matter, you're the generation that will carry the faith into the future. I mean, it's, thank you, Johan. He has to talk me into these things. But look, you know, tomorrow we can have entry by troops. I mean, we're being told that there's waiting souls. And so my encouragement is going back to what I said, any opportunity that you have to serve the faith, take that step. And once you take that step, you don't know where you're going. My husband and I, when we took the initial step, we had no idea of what our life would become. And it's true of all these Knights of Baha'u'llah. If they were standing right here, they'd say the same thing. You open a door to a life that's never going to be the same. But it's exciting and it's wonderful. I mean, but I'll tell you, you know, if you're planting seeds, sometimes it isn't easy in the beginning. You have to do a lot of things to till that soil and whatever. And outwardly it says you have to make sacrifices, but you never ever are making a sacrifice. You know, people say, oh, did you sacrifice to go to the Bahamas? No. Now, it wasn't easy. You know, I had to deal with rats. I mean, my mother scared me, made me scared of mice and whatever. But it was hot. I came from a cold climate to hot, and my hair fell out by handfuls, so the reason I look so young is because I got a wig. I mean, you know, you can find ways of doing things. But all these things one had to say was didn't sacrifice anything because the bounties were so great. Had we chosen not to go, I wouldn't be standing here this minute. I wouldn't be looking into all your faces. And I wouldn't be knowing that you're all going to be heroes, saints, and martyrs. Now, we can all do that. How are we doing? More questions? 10 minutes to 6.
Yes, please. I have a practical question about...
Yeah, well, I'm not too practical.
Hi. I had a practical question about door-to-door teaching, or basically teaching people in the street. Sometimes, you know, we have Anna's presentation as a tool in book 6, and, you know, we can always use that and sort of memorize it and remember the quotes, and, you know, it would definitely help us. But sometimes, like last night, we went to this shop, and we started talking to people about the faith. But the problem was that, at least me, I didn't know where to start from. We hadn't had enough conversation with the person to know what they're interested in, what aspect of the faith should I start from to teach. What did you do? There were a lot of homes that you just knocked on the door and talked to people. So what do you think?
We, in South Carolina, in the beginning, say when that Army of Light, that group of young people started out, they had an ebony reprint. It was there's Ebony magazine made had a whole section on the Baha'i faith, and so there were a lot of pictures with people of different races and whatever, and so they used that to explain what the faith was. Well, we were in a receptive area because people were looking for a lot of them were looking for the return of Jesus, the coming again, so it was an easy matter. So what I do once I know what background the person is I begin to share things from their own scripture that point to the coming of Baha'u'llah. And then when I've done that thing, then I usually, and talk about the building of the kingdom. Doesn't take long, and then I say, and then I will mention. And Baha'u'llah says, "This is the day." And if they're a receptive soul, something awakens in their heart or mind or whatever, and then we have. You have to. You have to be guided, and you will be guided. So just do it. It is a practical thing. Now, let me see. We have the Baha'i magazine. We have a lot of things with a lot of pictures that usually, and you get little things from Special Ideas that you can, while you're talking, you can show, progressive revelation or whatever. Just get your tools, but mostly just do it. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to be knocking on doors. If you're going to college, you got friends. If you're at work, it becomes, you're like an angel, and sometimes it's something about you that opens the door. That's as practical as I can get.
Thank you.
What kind of things did you do to? What kind of things did you do to prepare for your journey to the Bahamas? Like, what kind of things did you study, maybe?
We had been Baha'i for 4 years. My husband came from a background of not believing in God. I knew quite a bit about the Bible. Within 3 months of our first fireside, the three of us had become Baha'is. I read quite a bit. The basic books and whatever. My husband gathered knowledge intuitively. It was kind of hard to explain, but we really didn't know a whole lot when we went pioneering. But the couple that came in a year later had been Baha'is a long time, and we had such unity. They took us under their wing, and it was that couple that prepared us, really. For instance, when we'd have a fireside, they would always let me give the introductory talk. So I became very good at introductory talks, you see. And then, as I mentioned, the whole group would study divine art of living, and in the exchange between the people there and ourselves, we were constantly learning. Now, I've now been through all these Rui books, some of them twice, but every time I go through them, there's an increase in understanding. This is the difference. I think there's a difference between knowledge and understanding. It's that you get the knowledge from outside by reading something, but the understanding comes from within, and that's an ongoing process forever. I don't know whether that answers your question, but that seems to be the process.
We'll take one last question. Is there anyone that? Any question? Yes.
When you first went to the Bahamas and you were just by yourself as a Baha'i, with your husband as a Baha'i, what would you
say was the most important thing, or the most important things that kept you going when you didn't have the support of a community or anyone around you?
We had the vision of what we were there to accomplish. And when it's like the seed planter has the vision that there's going to be a tree and a blossom and a fruit. And the vision of that just kept us, one thing would lead to another. It's hard to explain. It was like somebody had taken a hold of you. And I think the only best thing I could say, it had to do with that promise of the Supreme Concord, suspended between heaven and earth, looking for instruments. Because every once in a while you'd be with somebody and you'd say something, oh, how did I ever know that? You know, it was like, now this gets spooky, doesn't it? I mean, but it's a reality. Now, how it works, I'm not sure. But then, you see, the more, if you go through the sequence of courses, and by the time I came to book 7, there wasn't a whole lot that I didn't already know. I could have quoted this and that, one thing and another. But I began to get an understanding that was hard to explain. And wrote Johann too. And I became so happy. I don't know why. Going through that book 7, it was tedious in some ways. But it made us so happy. And that's how we're supposed to be. Shogyafeni one time said that it isn't preaching that the world wants. He said that will cause them to respond. It's the joy, hope, and optimism of the believers that will capture the attention and cause them to ask, why in this world so hopelessly chaotic are these people so filled with joy and optimism? So I think maybe that may or may not answer your question, but it's somewhere in there is the answer, I guess.
Well, I just definitely want to make one practical observation, which is we're all sitting comfortably in our chairs and on the floor, and I've been supporting this wall here for the last hour and a half, but I've noticed that Gail has been standing, aided by her love for Baha'u'llah. And I think really I'd really thank you again, Gail, for sharing with us, and maybe we can share our thanks.